We'll talk about a quick turnaround. Today, only days after a strong re-election win, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is, in fact, still committed to a two-state solution with Palestine if circumstances improve. Netanyahu had promised the day before re-election, when he was slipping in the polls, that if re-elected, there would be no two-state solution with Palestine. In light of that statement, the United States then announced that it would consider supporting a UN Security Council resolution that would call for the resumption of political talks to conclude a final peace settlement. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki just yesterday did not rule out the possibility of the U.S. supporting a UN resolution on Israel-Palestine. But today, she backtracked, trying to avoid saying whether the U.S. would actually vote against Israel on a resolution.
Is it possible
that is biased or unfair? No, but obviously there are a range of options in the UN Security Council. I'm not going to prejudge it further.
But you're not going to vote in favor of or sit by and abstain from something that you think is unfair or biased against your big ally and top ally in the Middle East.
I think what we're going to look at is what the content of a resolution would be. I'm not going to prejudge what that will be, and we haven't made a decision.
In other words, your previous definition of biased or unfair might change.
I don't have anything more to add to preview on this topic.
Well, certainly we have more to add. I was joined earlier by Professor John Quigley from The Ohio State University. I began by asking him if this was all a ploy by Netanyahu just to pick up votes at the last minute.
Yes, I suppose his position is that he is in favor of a Palestine state unless it gets close to an Israeli election where he seems to be behind.
Does that hurt him ultimately with voters there who seem to have shifted their view of re-electing him based on some of the promises he was making?
I think that is quite frightening. That does mean that he was successful with that ploy, and it probably is an accurate reflection of the sentiment of the dominant Israeli public, that is, the Jewish Israeli public.
Professor, my guess would be that Netanyahu himself has no real interest in a two-state solution based on his actions. However, it seems like he has to play a little bit of a game here simply because if he doesn't, then Washington seems like it will go along with these UN resolutions. And so was today not just an attempt to say, okay, Washington, back down, let's not go the route of the UN, and we'll go back into the mode we've been in for the past 20 years, talking about the solution and never getting there?
I think that's right. I think his policy all along has been to say, in principle, he's in favor of a negotiated settlement that would lead to a Palestine state, but all the time imposing terms that are unacceptable to the Palestine side and terms that he knows are unacceptable so that he can continue building settlements and taking more of the territory.
What do you make of Jen Psaki's comments today over at the State Department where, she wanted to back down as well? It seemed like she, day before, had made it sound like the U.S. would support such a resolution. Today, the AP reporter was basically chasing her around that podium, trying to nail her down to get her to say something that would back that up. And today she didn't seem to want to do that at all.
Yes, she did seem to be backtracking on the whole matter.
Which ultimately puts us back where we were, say, 2 weeks ago. The U.S. essentially saying we stand with Israel and we'll support them. Israel saying we want to believe in a two-state solution. Eventually we'll get there. Palestinians saying we'd like to get there sometime in our lifetimes. And yet nothing seems to happen over the past 20 years. Are we looking at another 20 years of this?
Well, I think that's what the Palestine government is trying to avoid now by adopting a different tactic, one in which it will assert itself at the international level in terms of subscribing to international treaties, joining international organizations, approaching the International Criminal Court.
It seems like Israel was almost the poison pill, if you will, for U.S. politics. If you, as a candidate, express any attitude that you would not support Israel, you're obviously never going to make it to the White House, it seems like. But on top of that, we have a sitting president who has less than 2 years left. If he were to shift away from Israel, would that not become a major issue in the 2016 run-up?
I'm sure it would be. If you look at the attitude in the U.S. Congress, it's much stronger in support of Israel than that, actually, of President Obama or of any recent president. The hold of the Israeli lobby on the Congress is quite strong. And as well, as you suggest, in a presidential election, it carries great sway.
What do you make of the fact that President Obama has not yet called Prime Minister Netanyahu? He has not done so, even though I think Secretary of State John Kerry did. The president himself has not. What do you make of that?
I don't make a great deal of that. There can be reasons for timing of a phone call. Although, you know, if President Obama were very elated over what's happened in Israel, you could expect that he would have called sooner, and I suspect he's not very elated.
In terms of the U.S. continuing to be Israel's strongest ally, I believe Netanyahu said that. The U.S. is still Israel's greatest ally, he says. Do you believe that that remains to be true and will continue to be so into the next administration that comes along?
I think it is very likely. Over the last several decades, it hasn't mattered whether the administration is that of the Republicans or the Democrats. I think what is perhaps hopeful in the situation is that the Europeans will now turn more in favor of some real settlement in the region, and that might force a change in policy on the part of the United States.
Very interesting. I do want to correct one thing very quickly. My producer's telling me that while we've been on the air, that the president has, at some time today, called Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So that's been covered. Professor Emeritus John Quigley from The Ohio State University, thank you so much.
Thank you.